This is Mason Web TV, powered by HCC.
Talking to Dick Taylor. He is, chairman or president, Dick? Do you prefer?
Chairman.
Chairman. Okay, chairman of the Port of Shelton Commission. And Wendy Smith, who is executive director of the Port. The reason I'm asking for this interview is to talk about some recent developments with the, commercial aviation, I don't know, somebody explain to me this committee that's going on.
Sure, I can do that. I'd happily do that. It's called the Commercial Aviation Coordinating Commission, and they've really been tasked by legislature to, they've been studying for years the growth at SeaTac Airport, and they've been tasked, this committee made up of many members, with looking at that growth and the numbers and how SeaTac is going to be able to provide for the growing needs in aviation. With that, legislature said, you as a committee start looking around the state and determine, is there another site that could be potentially another SeaTac? So is there over 4,000 acres of empty, vacant land that could be created for another hub? Probably not, just so, but they're looking. But more importantly, they're studying existing airports and how they could maybe either combined or separate, take on some of the traffic. So what does that mean? Could be cargo, could be passenger, could be general aviation, which is what we really have most of at Sanderson Field. So maybe other airports just expand on their general aviation, and that leaves other existing airports like a Payne Field to go more into the passenger side or something. So
where does Sanderson Field fit into all this? Because I saw a list of 6 airports that they're considering. Is that right? If they started with 20 and now we're down to 6, and Sanderson Field is one of them, right?
Right.
that's correct.
And like Wendy says, we aren't being studied as being a replacement for Sanderson Field. We're an overflow field. We would probably take more general aviation assets here than any commercial assets. Possibly freight, but probably not passenger.
Okay. So what would be the benefit of this expansion to Sanderson Field? What's the benefit for Mason County, for Shelton? What do we know?
So first of all, what it would be, we're kind of excited to just even be thought of. We're kind of that quiet, out of the way little GA airport that a lot of people love for the fact that we are kind of that quiet operation. But JVLM uses our field because it is quiet. What this would do potentially is expand our runway. It would allow for corporate jets. So what that would do, it would lengthen the runway to where we could have companies coming to the Mason County area that have their own corporate jets, or they fly their product out of Sanderson Field without having to travel to another existing airport. That's a huge benefit. Does it create further operations? Possibly. Does it create potential for more noise? Possibly. But again, you have to weigh all that with helicopter operations and how noisy that can get. That would tend to die down. The military operations wouldn't want to come to an airport that was being more active than we are today. So there's a lot to explore. We've been listed in the top 6 because of proximity. We're rather close. We're only 20-ish miles from I-5. We're only, probably about a little over, we're within the 90-mile radius they wanted to see by SeaTac, because that's the hub of the population in our state. So as people think this out, they think, well, gosh, why would you not put it over in Eastern Washington where they have, expansive land and, that kind of thing, but the people aren't there. So to get the people there to travel would be a tougher endeavor. So this is a 40-year no, 2040, so 20-year study. So if, for instance, if we were to be selected as one of the airports that would help in this cause, it would, this wouldn't happen for 20 plus years. The COVID of today has also decreased operations, and so this could set it backwards, and it could be 50 year, 30-year study, so I think there's just a lot. I think what Sanderson Field has to offer and what benefit it could bring is it really opens the door for just further business and economic development. And that's what ports are about,
Right.
that and transportation. So
Yeah.
it really would offer more to our customers.
Yeah,
No,
we already are designated as a central airfield for disaster relief on the coast. So it fits in with that. The airport is on stable ground, and the traffic here is not all that heavy, both road and air traffic. But we are close enough to the I-5 corridor that we could be servicing those areas by road as well. Both freight and passenger. But as we talked about earlier, we're not probably not looking at passenger operations. Corporate, maybe corporate or freight operations, but certainly GA, general aviation.
So the question would be, well, why not Olympia? Why not Bremerton? And I know that there's some.
Well, we're not going to advocate one way or the other for Olympia or Bremerton. They have their own unique situations, and maybe Wendy knows a little bit more about. Olympia's not in the picture right now, I don't think.
Yeah, so one comment would be Olympia did not, they're pretty landlocked where we have expansive land, and so they weren't really thinking they would be considered or wanted to entertain any expansion for this purpose, but they are interested in partnering, and that's what they indicated to the committee in their letter. We said we were fully interested and highly interested in the process and being included, but knowing that Olympia is on our side or on an airport side, when you mention Bremerton or Olympia, either way, even as far as I'd say Centralia or Toledo or any of the others, that would impact us too. It would impact greatly in a positive way. So if Bremerton was the chosen airport, then they're close enough to us that people would, businesses would look at us because of our proximity to them. So I don't think I don't think we can lose, and yeah, maybe it's better sited somewhere other than where we are, although Olympia being more populated maybe wouldn't fit. Bremerton is further away from I-5. And so they're further from that SeaTac hub, not by flight pattern, but by probably by traffic. So I don't think, I think it's an exciting proposition just statewide, and it's fun to follow. Whether, the state has done studies before and they haven't, nothing's happened, they've studied something and then they've never gone with a plan. So maybe nothing will happen. Maybe traffic impacts will decline based on what we've seen this year, just in terms of, the fears or the virus or the conditions of flying. I doubt it. I think it's still on the growth, and because we're such an export state, there's needs for product to get in and out, and I just think that fits right into our mission. We're here to provide transportation. We're here to provide jobs, and if we can expand on that through Sanderson Field, I think that it's a good opportunity to explore. So.
I can't, how do we phrase this? The timeline of this, I mean, you talked about, we're talking 20, 30 years in the future, and it takes, read something takes like 20 years to build an airport that we're talking about.
Right.
What's the timeline from your standpoint, where do you think the timeline would be for the Port of Shelton in Sanderson Field? Or do we have any idea at this point? We're still studying.
We're still
Yeah,
studying.
I think, yeah, and I think the official timeline that was mandated by legislature was to come down to picking the 2 potential sites by, I want to say it was January 2021. I
Yeah.
think that may be pushed out based on, you know, the just what's
Current
happening.
events, yeah.
Yeah. So, so I think we won't even know until at least January if we're even in part, and then that's one of 2, and so that's still not a decision. So, yeah, I would say it probably is more likely it would be a later time frame than that. So potentially, and I'm trying to think. I have some papers here, and maybe I'll thumb through them as I'm talking, but. I was going to say potentially I would see that if we were.
Oh,
That's odds. I think we lost Wendy. She's all
anyone?
frozen. Yeah, she's all frozen.
Yeah. Well,
So,
you know, in that vein, we're looking at January, early next year for the top 2 candidates for this planning. And then, as far as the timeline goes, it's going to be another 20 years of planning to do. And then I would think out to 40 years to get an airport, SeaTac size, built. Now, so where does that put us? We would be somewhere inside that window.
So I was looking at some of the information that Wendy provided me, and it said something about the concern for Sanderson Field is the length of the runway. And
Right now, yeah,
Right now. And there have been some talks about extending that runway.
that's correct.
So where are we on that process?
Well, on that process, it's in our strategic plan to lengthen the runway. We haven't funded it yet, but we're working toward that. That's one of our goals of this commission, is to lengthen the runway. And we've talked about it at our various retreats and planning sessions over the years.
So I don't know if you've read some of the articles and all the uproar June when they were talking about locating this airport between Little Rock and Black Lake and Thurston County.
Yeah, that's not going to happen down there.
Right. So,
but you know, part of that is that it's the demographics, it's where, and it's the geography of where that is.
Wendy's back.
Yeah, Wendy's back. What'd you do? But she's muted now.
Sorry.
Yeah.
It all of a sudden said I was locked up. It turned my computer off. I plugged in. I don't know if I ran out of battery. I'm so sorry.
It's all
How
right.
are you going to save me from everything I just said?
Yeah, I have no idea what you said.
We're just talking about the runway and extending the runway.
Gotcha.
And I mentioned that it is in our strategic plan, or our strategic plans to lengthen that runway and move ahead with it. When that happens, I'm not sure, but it relatively, in the overall picture of things, relatively soon. That means in a period of a few years rather than 10 years or so.
And that would be extending it to the west, right?
Yes.
Yeah, because you can't come
we own
across the
some
highway.
land down there.
Right.
We own some land down there that we can expand into, and we need to acquire a little bit more as well.
Now,
Back to that timeline, Diedrich, I'm
Sure.
looking and it says recommend a short list of no more than 6 by January 1st, 2021. So that was the January date. They've already done that. The top 2 by September 2021. So it looks like it's a year from now they'd even decide who the top 2 potentially. And then the single preferred by January 1st, 2022 by a 60% majority vote. So it's a ways out even for this decision. So.
and who knows what's going to happen if a decision is made and it gets to construction, different administration, different people.
Exactly.
Great.
Yeah.
Sure. Yep.
So we're not going to see a big expansion at the airport tomorrow.
No, bottom line is we're not going to see an expansion like that in the near future. No.
Yeah. And I think what you would see most of would be lengthening the current runway, and then probably adding a parallel runway, because that's what we would need for the larger passenger, not necessarily passenger, but like for distribution or corporate. That's typically what you see. So we'd lengthen and then we'd add an another parallel runway.
Same direction.
Same direction, parallel. Yep.
So if we look into our crystal ball and say we get some more traffic at Sanderson Field, how would that impact, say, Kapowson? No.
I guess what we know is just even their past, the airport that they were operating out of got too busy even with smaller airplanes. And so as airplanes expand in operations, it does affect people flying through the air, basically. So I think it would affect their operations. It would cause them to have to think, maybe go, elsewhere, another airport, or just consider they'd have to be among this traffic. But I think it could get too big for them. So definitely, and to be honest, it may. I mean, if it got big enough for us, I mean, right now we house many tenants that are non-aviation, and that's by nature of the deed we were provided. But it's an airport, and so if airport operations take over, that could affect other tenants. That's why we have Johns Prairie, so we have room to move. But so I mean, it could be something that would grow to that. Again, it's all on time. We'd know far ahead. We'd be able to plan for that if this truly did happen. But that inevitably could have, we've talked about the inactive runway for years, and that's slated for aviation. It's, for hangars, future airport growth. And so that would, take away some of those user groups that we've offered the space, and all of them know that, it just, will it happen sooner than later, or will that still be 20 years away? Hard to tell.
Okay. I don't have anything else to ask about that particular thing. I do want to ask about other things with the Port of Shelton.
Okay.
Since we're on Sanderson Field, you're resurfacing the runway, correct?
Right.
Correct.
Can you update everybody on that?
Sure. So starting this week, on Monday, we had our, and I'm not going to remember I know their acronym, CLNM, and they do the LARC surveys. That was part of our agreement with U.S. Fish and Wildlife in our biological assessment of the airport. We were required to have them go out prior to construction and look for the LARC, the existing LARC nests, or finding the birds themselves. So they came out on Monday. I haven't seen the report yet, but that was a requirement. And what that'll do is create the buffer zones that we've all agreed to around the areas they are. This is kind of the end of the nesting season typically, so they shouldn't see much. And so they create the buffer zones. The good news is we've done all off pavement work last winter, fall and winter. And so that's really where you run into them. They're not right on the pavement. And that's, the core part of our work now is going to be on the pavement. So I think the construction crew's due to mobilize next Monday. And they're going to get geared up and started. And what their first operation will be is to close the runway and the taxiway to stripe the runway, saying, X's, don't land here, and then stripe the taxiway saying you can land here, because that's our option to do while it's closed. It doesn't sound like there's going to be a great level of full closures, just based on the fact that we can use that taxiway. So coming.
What's the investment into this project, and how much is port money?
So it's about $3.5 million, and FAA covers 90% of that, and DOT Aviation covers 5% or up to $150,000 per year. So it looks like it's less than 5% on a project like this. So we'll pick up, I don't have the math in front of me, but we'll pick up the other 5%, which maybe you'll end up being about 7%. So it's a pretty limited outlay. The scariest part is you always pay for you pay the contractor and then you get reimbursed by the federal government. So the scariest part is you're putting your money. So, but it's a really good return. If you think about a project of that size and, whatever 5%, I mean, even then is a good on what we're getting done. So
let's talk about the port's finances. You're in pretty good shape.
Yep.
Is that a good assessment?
Yeah.
Yes.
Do we have, you've done some smart banking, I guess you could say, for one thing.
Well,
With
yeah,
the
we have. Yeah, our investment strategy has changed somewhat, and we've been doing very well in that direction. Also, we've cut back our expenses considerably. Our personnel costs are down. Yeah, all costs are being lowered as we speak, and it's due to the management of Wendy and her staff that causes that to happen. And so that improves our financial position, of course, when we do that.
For sure. I think we're also seeing in our last meeting, I think on the 7th of July, we paid off a last payment on a 1996 curb loan. And so that's, 20 years worth of payments, and we've got some other outstanding bonds, but they're all coming down. I think I want to say they all mature like in 2025. I mean, it's coming really quick. So
Yeah.
As those payments lower, and we're seeing some lowering of the payments, but as they go away, we're due. We've talked about, unfortunately the virus interfered a little bit, but we've talked about this year, we're going to be building a building. It may creep into next year just based on, contractors were pretty hard to get out to work during this whole shutdown. But we'll get started on that. We're still full. We still have tenants that have needs for expansion. We, would love to, if somebody calls, say, yes, we do have space. We don't want lots of empty space, but so I think we're just in a really good position. And even with all the shutdown and the problems businesses have had, we have a lot of essential and existing businesses, and they've been able to weather the storm really well. And we've, been able to partner and help where needed. So I think we're in good position for sure.
So space at the port, any vacancies, I guess is the word, or are you pretty full up?
Yeah.
We're
Still tight.
Yeah, we're still continue to be full. I think we have land, of course, and we do have a shed building out at Johns Prairie that had a little classroom building next door. And we have updated the classroom building with, a new roof and some various things. We need to think about power if someone were to come. But the shed building, we're talking about with our own manpower, walling that in. It's kind of one of those mill buildings that has, one wall.
That's a cold one. Yeah.
We're talking about milling. We're talking about walling it in so that we have that potentially available for warehouse use or some kind of a use for a tenant or existing or new coming. So,
Cannabis businesses who have quite a few at port.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And is that becoming more saturated than anybody expected, or did the port do the right thing?
What do you mean by saturated?
Well, it seems to me like in the beginning there were a lot of companies popping up, and it seemed to me like everybody. I mean, I have a cousin who's in the business in Pierce County, and it just seems to me like there's way too many growers. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's plenty of users out there. But the port has how many cannabis businesses on port property?
We have 6. We have 6 existing. Yes, I agree with you. I think the market did get saturated, and I unfortunately think that was a little bit to do with our state, that governed them. They kind of they limited licenses, and then all of a sudden they just opened it up and anybody and everybody could get a license or 2 or 3. And so it did get saturated. And that was a real concern. As you probably remember, all last year we were renewing our 5-year leases that we signed all in 1 year. And that's pretty scary to think, you have 6 cannabis properties that are, make up a pretty good percentage of our overall revenue. And if they all were to have folded, that was, all at one time. So it starts to, as maybe it sounds easy, hey, if we do it all in 1 year, we do it all in 1 year. But to me, that gave me kind of a clue that, it's kind of nice to stagger these leases and how long they are, because then you don't have the hit all at once. We were lucky. We didn't have a hit at all. They all renewed. I think our latest, praise goes to Laughing Grass, who just renewed for 5 years. They were questioning last year, so they renewed for a year to see how that year took them and what they could dabble into as new products and things, and it worked. And they've now signed a 5 year. So I mean, we are very lucky, and I think it helped that in the state they were considered essential. So they've all gone crazy with the times and the shutdown, and I think that was positive on our side and theirs.
In the leases, you've set them up so that the port is protected in case somebody gets in there and says it's illegal. No, we're going to shut them all down and raid all of them.
Yep.
We do. We have what we call it a kind of a trapdoor clause. So if the feds swoop in and say at any given time you can't do this, we're protected and we can end the lease immediate. Yep.
Okay. I think I've covered everything and taken up enough of your time.
That's Port of Shelton Commission Chair Dick Taylor and Port of Shelton Executive Director Wendy Smith. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for watching Mason Web TV, powered by HCC.